Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be continuing, and I have to apologize very, very deeply, profusely, for taking so long. Today we're doing part 4 of the personality traits. We're going to be doing neuroticism, and I apologize that it's taken me so long to crack on with this particular series, but I've had some other priorities and other concerns, and also as a bit of a confession, I have one of the things that I try to do is eliminate as much personal bias as possible, right? And so, in order to discuss a personality trait in an appropriate manner, so to speak, let's put it that way, I have to make sure I get rid of my own personal biases towards the personality. So, for example, so today we're doing neuroticism. I'm extremely low in neuroticism, right? I'm only in the 11th percentile, which means that which means that people who are high in neuroticism, the very opposite for me, are people that I would find very, very frustrating, very irritating, and things of that sort. And therefore, I would have a bias towards that sort of behavior. I would, and naturally, which is, people that are very different from us, we have a bias against them. And so it's been one of those things that I've really had to make sure that I'm not putting my own bias and preconceptions and things like that into the information I give you, because then that's just not helpful to you guys at all, and it's ethically it's not right for me to do that as well. So I always do my best. Can we ever be 100% certain? Who knows? Which is why I always, if you guys go into the section that is the description of the video, you get a little drop down menu. I will always put the link to the scientific papers and to the scientific research, so that you can go there, read for yourself, make up your own mind. And if you see, he was a little bit wrong here, then you can go and you've got access then to that, so all that information yourself. You can go and have a look at all that sort of thing. So that's where I am, and that's one of the reasons why it's taken me a while, because I haven't been 100% confident that I was going to be able to do that. Also, one of the reasons is in my past, had a lot of bad experiences with people high in neuroticism and stuff like that in general. And once I start talking about it, you'll see why. You will probably have as well. So anyway, so enough about me, enough about that. Let's get into it. Personality traits. So it's one of the big five in the big five personality trait theory. That has been it's been in development for absolute ages, and it's a trait that is known as neuroticism, and another way to describe it is sensitivity to negative emotion, right? So depending on the tests that you're taking and all that sort of thing, some people don't like, when they construct these tests, they don't like the word neuroticism, so they will say sensitivity, instead they will describe it as sensitivity to negative emotion. And that's essentially what it is. It's a sensitivity to negative emotion, as in how readily, how easily do you experience negative emotion, right? And that's like I've mentioned in previous iterations on the other personality traits. Your personality traits are almost like filters through which so whatever's happening in the world goes through this filter, and it's like an interpretive scheme, basically. So someone, for example, who's very, very high neuroticism, let's say, for example, let's have an illustration here, right? You're walking past a group of people, and suddenly those people burst into laughter. If you're very high in neuroticism, your first reaction will be, are they laughing at me? If you are very, very low in neuroticism, your first reaction would be like, oh, I wonder what was so funny. Maybe there was a good joke. So the high neuroticism person will take it personally, right? Are they laughing at me? They will instantly become very, very self-conscious. Are they laughing at me? Is there something wrong with me? Whereas a person who's very, very low in neuroticism, that negative emotion doesn't feature at all, and they will be like, oh, maybe someone had told a funny joke, or or they won't even think anything more of it. They'll just carry on in their way. And that is sort of the most basic, at the most basic level. That's one of the big differences in people with people in the different extremities of neuroticism. And then depending on where you are in that, you will obviously then lean more to one side or the other, or you could be in the middle somewhere. Now, neuroticism, it has to be said, of all of the personality traits, neuroticism is the single trait with the most negative attributes of all the other traits. It's actually very, very difficult to have anything good to say about high neuroticism. So basically, this is one of those things that you want to be as low in it as possible, and if you're high in it, it's going to really, really, really cause you a heck of a lot of problems. It's quite devastating. For people who are high neuroticism, and once you understand it, you'll be like, wow, it really is very, very difficult. So this is one of those things, like for me, my temperamental proclivity, my personality proclivity, is to, my knee-jerk response, so to speak, is to get very, very frustrated and annoyed with people who are very high neuroticism. And one of the things that I've had to learn, right, which is the development of character that helps you overcome your temperamental proclivities when they are inappropriate. One of the things that I've had to learn is be a lot more patient with people who are high in neuroticism, and try to understand them a bit more and things like that, and try to monitor. So for example, I'm very, very low in neuroticism, so which means it's very, very difficult. And also I'm extremely high in extraversion and high in assertiveness. So it's very, very difficult to offend me. It's very, very difficult to make me feel afraid or make me feel victimized or any of these kinds of. It's very, very, very difficult. I'm practically not afraid of anything, really. And there's a difference between being afraid and having a healthy respect for something. So if I saw a lion roaming outside, I'd be, I wouldn't exactly go pet it or anything like that. I have a healthy respect for the thing, but I'm not otherwise afraid, sort of things like that. And it's difficult to it's very easy for someone like me to then respond in a very dismissive or very frustrated way with people who are afraid of things. You can be a bit insensitive, so well, get over yourself and things like that. And as I've said before, personality traits. When we're talking about personality traits, we're not talking about a person's character. We're talking about a biological trait. So this is your knee-jerk, this is your first reaction, your first response. So for example, for those of you that are Christians, when we talk about the spirit versus the flesh, when we're talking about personality traits, we're talking about the flesh. We're talking about, this is your biological proclivity. This is your first reaction, right? And then your character, which is able to override that. Your character is then what we would refer to as the spirit. You develop the right spirit, the right character that helps you temper your responses. So if we're having a look, the very, very, very big difference between men and women. So typically, on average, so for example, if we're looking on average, where do men and women sit on the scale of neuroticism? So your average man is hovering at about, let's say, 40 percentile, whereas your average woman is hovering at about 60. So for example, if you were a betting person, right, and you went out into the town center, it was people all over the place, and you randomly pulled out a woman and randomly pulled out a man, and someone said to you, right, place a bet, who is going to be higher in neuroticism? If you bet on the woman every single time that the woman is the one that's the higher one in neuroticism, you would win 60% of the time. That's how common it is, right? And this is one of the biggest differences between men and women. The other one is agreeableness. So women also are at about the same. Women are higher in agreeableness at about the same sort of percentage, right? So when we're talking about neuroticism has two subtraits, right? So you can break it down into two subcategories, and the two subcategories are withdrawal and volatility. Okay, and again, women are higher in both of those as well. It's very, very much a female dominated trait, for sure. And it's actually the root of a lot of the when you understand the personality differences and things like that, it's one of the places where the most misunderstanding between men and women actually are derived from in terms of personality. So for example, now if someone is very high in neuroticism, right, they're going to experience anxiety very easily. Anxiety, worry, fear, defensive anger, anticipatory fear. So for example, something you might have heard someone say, well, I feel afraid or I feel anxious, and you say to them, well, why? And they're like, I don't know why, I just know that I'm worried about something, right? And then I've heard a lot of women say this, is like they get worried when they have nothing to worry about, because then they worried that they might be forgetting about something they should be worried about, right? So it's an absolute catastrophe. Okay. And those are the kinds of things that you're going to feel. So high neuroticism is so feelings of hopelessness, feelings of despair, feelings of being victimized. So it's very, very easy to say something to someone, and and a person who's high neuroticism will easily take offense, or be like, oh, why are you saying this against me? Why are you being so mean? Why are you being so whatever? Things like that. Very, very, very very, very defensive people. They tend to, so there's an expression, make a mountain out of a molehill. Tend to be those kinds of people, right? Something that's not really a problem, they'll make a mountain out of a molehill. So yeah, those are sadness, pain. So if you feel emotional pain and sadness are not necessarily the same thing, and so those are what you can expect from people that are very, very high in this trait. And then conversely, people who are very low in this trait, they're very chilled people. You can tease them, hey, cool. They'll laugh at themselves. They're not very self-conscious, sort of thing. One of the interesting things, do you often dream that you're butt naked in the middle of a crowd and being exposed? Chances are you're very, very high neuroticism. You don't like being exposed, and things like that. Very, very, very common for people that they're worried about that sort of thing, being exposed and all of that sort of thing. So people who are high in neuroticism, they don't like things that are new, because things that are new, if something's new, means they're uncertain, and they don't handle uncertainty very well. They don't handle change very well. It's actually very similar to people who are high in conscientiousness. People who are actually, here's the difference. People who are high in conscientiousness don't like change, because they like everything in their nice, neat little boxes, whereas people high in neuroticism are afraid of change. So there's a difference. One is preference, one is actual fear, right? There's uncertainty. So, switch off the lights and there's a shadow, right? Someone who's high in neuroticism or more, oh, that shadow is a killer out to get me, kind of thing, right? And so that's more or less where they are. Now, when it breaks down into withdrawal and volatility, there's that difference over there. So someone who's withdrawal. Now, if you think about the word withdrawal, right, it's very common sense where it's as the word says, they withdraw. They withdraw into themselves, right? So someone is when you see someone is feeling bad about something, and you ask, well, what's wrong? And they're like, I don't really want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it, right? That's someone who's withdrawal. They retreat into themselves. They don't want to talk about it. So these are people who are easily doubt, easily feel embarrassed. They're very, very self-conscious. They're easily discouraged and things of that sort. They fear punishment, and all of that sort of thing. They are, how can I say? Here's the interesting thing, right? They're also very, very concerned about social rejection. And feeling threatened. It's very, very easy to make them threatened. So also if they've been involved, for example, let's say in some sort of bad situation, they don't recover very, very easy from a bad situation. So, for example, let's take the example of bullying, right? So I even though I'm a high extroversion, everyone's experienced bullying or teasing or something like that in their life, right? It's just one of those things that almost everyone experiences at some point in their lives. And for someone like me, I brushed it off and I recovered. For me, it was no big deal. I'm like, well, it happens, right? Whereas someone who's very, very high in withdrawal, it'll affect them a heck of a lot worse, and they will really become. So if there's a bully at school, so for me, if there was a bully at school, I didn't really worry about it too much, and if they got in my face, it's still unpleasant. But if they got in my face, I'd get back up in their face and and shout them and be confrontational. Whereas with someone who's then high in neuroticism, high in withdrawal, they won't even want to go to school anymore. They'll be like, they prefer to run away. So that's the flight instinct. They won't want to go if there's a bad situation that happens somewhere. They won't want to go to that place anymore, and all of that sort of thing. They don't recover very, very well from traumatic experiences very, very easily. Now, if we're talking about volatility, volatility is actually is a more explosive. So volatile, if you think about a volatile element, is something that explodes easily. So people that are very explosive, so for example, if you criticize someone and they just blow up at you, that's someone who's high in neuroticism and high in volatility, right? So they'll just blow up at you. And if you see that they're feeling bad about something and you ask them, so what's wrong? Oh man, they're bloody hell, you know. and they carry on. This is all wrong and everything like that. And they don't mind telling you, right? They can be very, very sort of argumentative in that way. They don't take criticism very, very well. So we all have these people at work, for example. Well, they'll make a mistake, and oh man, slippery shoulders, man. It's always someone else's fault. It's their fault. It's their fault. Oh, these people, and they'll always blame the fact that they made a mistake on someone else rather than just put their hands up, say, oh, I messed up, my bad, right? They don't take it criticism very well at all. So here's one of the interesting things, and it's comical, but it's actually true, right? One of the things about comedy is it actually reveals the truth about a lot of things. So think about in society, if we look at the male-female difference, right? So if we look at volatility, for example, the mean percentile means that the average percentile for women in a population sits at 57.5 for volatility, which is quite high, right? Whereas for men, it's only at 42.5. So this is why you will find that women are a lot more sensitive to teasing, right? It's actually, sorry, I've got a bit of an itchy eye. It's hay fever season. Oh. Right. So here's one of the interesting thing, right? You find that men tease each other all the time, right? Sometimes we don't even learn each other's names. It's like, hey, stupid. Hey, you over there with crooked nose, right? I've got a crooked nose. Hey, you crooked nose, you, hey, moron. We greet each other by insulting each other, right? And women find this to be like, what? How can you do that, right? And this is something that a lot of women have actually told me is like, women can't tease each other the way men tease each other because it immediately starts a fight, right? And that's because of this volatility dimension. They take it personally and end up in a fight. There was a very funny episode on that. Remember that 70s show with those kids? There was a very, very funny episode, right, where the girls in the episode were trying to prove that women could play fight without actually fighting and being serious about it, right? Because, the boys always walk around and they punch each other and they give each other a smack over the head and they roughhouse with each other, but they're still good friends and it's not a problem. And in this particular episode, I think it was Donna and I forget the name of the other girl, they started play fighting with each other, and within about 5 seconds they were actually fighting with each other. They took it too seriously. And so that's kind of the difference over there between men and women. So the volatility is like, you can't, and even with the withdrawal. So something that men always experience, you can say whatever you want about men, and men are like, yeah, all right. Men actually take on, again, this is on average. Obviously there are a lot of men out there that don't take criticism very well, and you find that's weak men that are high neuroticism. But on average, men take, like for example, a comedian can go up and he can take the mickey out of men, no problem. But as soon as you make, and it's like, yeah, well, fair enough. We kind of are like that. But as soon as you make a joke about women, oh, you're sexist, you are this and that and that. And women don't take criticism, let alone jokes, very well at all. And you can see that generally in the world. As soon as you say something against a woman, oh, immediately it's sexism, it's misogyny, it's whatever the case might be. But yet people can say whatever they want about men and everyone's fine with it, and men are like, oh yeah, well, carry on with life. It's just words, right? And so that's the big difference. Just to give you guys an idea, if we go back to withdrawal, the mean percentile for women in a population is 60, whereas for men it's 40. So that's very interesting over there. So women a lot higher and in this than men are. So people who are high in volatility, they experience frustration very easily, disappointment, irritability, and they are quite easily stirred up to anger and things of that sort. All right, and it takes a while. They don't calm down very easily. So, for example, one of the things that here's one of the interesting things, right? If you look out in the world at sort of the social realm and sort of see how do these traits play out. If you look, for example, at your social justice warriors, right? What are they constantly going on about? They're going on about safe spaces and anti-bullying and anti this and anti that, and everything is about, don't hurt my feelings and treat other people with dignity and all these kinds of things. And one of the fascinating things is that these people are saying, well, there's no difference between men and women, right? They want to erase. They think that if you say that there's a difference between men and women, then that is sexist, right? But one of the most fascinating things is that they will say that there's no difference between men and women, and yet they will go out and express the stereotype of their gender in a very, very stereotypical way, by saying, oh, well, we need safe spaces. So when you start hearing, oh, we need safe spaces, immediately you know that's people very, very high in withdrawal. Very high withdrawal. They need safe spaces. They're easily offended. They want to retreat. They want to retreat into their safe space. And those people, they see the world as a place of threat. Everyone is trying to threaten me. And also you get this thing with like rape culture, for example. Men are all predators. Men they're out to get us, right? Again, that's people very, very high in neuroticism, very high in withdrawal. Oh, they're trying to get us. We're afraid. I can't even walk to the shop without being afraid of being raped. And then there's this whole controversy that goes on. And even though if you look at it statistically, it's not true. There's no such thing as rape culture and all these kinds of things, right? Men are very, very, if the vast majority of men, if we know that a guy is a rapist, we'll take him out, man. We'll finish him, right? And even like these men that end up in prison, right? If they are rapists or if they are pedophiles, they tell the prisoners, look, this guy, he's a rapist, he's a pedophile, and man, he will have the most miserable time in prison, right? They will really go, oh, all the murderers, all the other guys that are in there for other reasons. The rapists and the pedophiles, man, those guys get really the short end of the stick, man, for sure, right? It's actually like a punishment, the guards tell him, listen, this guy's a pedophile, this guy's a rapist, and the other inmates, man, they'll go after the guy. They have an absolutely miserable time of it. So, that's what you are seeing in the world. And then also what you often find then is you have those. So, for example, you will again with the social justice warriors sort of thing, you will see them run up on stage and start screaming and shouting and jumping up and down, and they don't allow so let's say there's a debate going on, they just start screaming and shouting and carrying on, and they start chanting and things like that. And those are people who are high in volatility. It's like you can't have a conversation with someone that's very high in volatility, because they just get angry and they just lose it, right? They just lose it. How dare you disagree with me? How dare, and it all becomes about ad hominems and things like that. It's awful. It really, really is awful. And one of the interesting things that they have found is like, on average, this is obviously not dead strict rule, but on average, what you see play out in society is always the extremes, right? So it's not to say that all women are like that and all social justice warriors are like that, but what we see. But the stuff that we notice the most are the people at the extremities, right? Of the personality types. So those are the extreme examples of the traits. So if you look that. So you see that men and women are offset, right, by that 20%. So on average, women sit at about 60%, whereas men on average are at the 40th percentile. So that's about a 20. It's not massive. It's not like it's 90 or 80% difference, right? So there's a 20% difference, but that gap means that on average, men and women sit on neuroticism at about the same level, right? So with all of these personality traits, in the middle, on the average, men and women are pretty much the same on average. But because of that disparity, that 20% disparity, means that at the extremes, as you go towards the extremes, so as you go to the lower end of neuroticism, right, you will get less and less and less women and more men. And then on the higher end of neuroticism, you will get less and less men and more women, right? So if you look for the most neurotic person in 1,000, it'll be a woman, like guaranteed, right? And if you go and you look for the least neurotic person in 1,000, almost guaranteed it'll be a man, right? Because as you've got, you've got a bell curve. So you've got a bell curve. And so in the middle, pretty much men and women are pretty much the same, right? But as you go to the extremities, it's at the extremities where the biggest differences lie, and where it tapers, or on the low end, women taper off and men increase, and then on the other extremity, men taper off and women increase. Which is why and it explains why on average. So if you look at the psychological literature, women suffer from depression more than men do, and all of those kinds of psychological disorders, depression, anxiety, etc. Those are the vast majority of them are women. And also self-help books, right? Self-help books. Men simply don't buy self-help books, right? It's an industry that's driven expressly by women, and it's also why. So if you think about the self-help, it's almost exclusively driven by women, and also a lot of men who are high neuroticism. Because one of the things with neuroticism is you're very self-conscious, you're very, very self-critical, right? You're very, very self-critical. So those of you will find that if you're high neuroticism, you will find that you are harder on yourself than anyone else will actually be. Right, and the problem is that because you're so high in neuroticism, you'll be very, very hard on yourself and very, very self-critical. But because you're high in neuroticism, you won't want to believe that you are your own worst enemy, and therefore you will project that onto society. So rather than blame yourself for being overly self-critical and being your own source of negativity, the people who are high neuroticism will want to blame society, or blame peer pressure, or they always want to blame someone else for why they're feeling so negative all the time, and why they're so hard on themselves and things like that. And it's also for again, it's why women drive the beauty industry so much more than men do, because again, it's a self-critical thing. I want to be more beautiful, I want to be more this, I want to be more that. They're constantly chasing this ideal because they're so self-critical, right? And this is an internal, they're so self-critical. And one of the disgusting things about the fashion industry and the beauty industry is it actually takes advantage of this trait and aggravates it in order to play on the woman's insecurity, and then sort of manipulate women into going and buying more shoes and buying more this and that. And it's actually a bit of a vicious circle. So they're very, very self-critical, which means they're more likely to go and try and do these things to make themselves better, or to try and read self-help books to make me feel better, or be better, whatever the case might be. But then the fashion industry or the beauty industry comes in and tells, well, you're still not good enough. Here's this impossible ideal to try and achieve. And if you buy all of these things, then you're going to be fine and you're going to be happy, right? Because here's the thing, right? Not only are they very self-critical, but they're less happy, right? People who are high neuroticism, they experience depression and anxiety more, and in order to try and get away from that depression and anxiety, they will on average pursue things that are going to make them feel better, right? Which is why the term retail therapy is a term that's used by women more, right? They go out shopping because it helps them feel better. The women are more likely to go to spas, to go for a massage, to go for retail therapy and things of that sort. And even men do this to a much lesser degree, but men still do it as well. For example, I'm someone who you can see from my blinking and my twitches, I've got Tourette's, and one of the comorbidities of Tourette's is that I have like episodic depression, for example. Every now and then, even though I'm very, very low in neuroticism, because of this disorder, I will fall into a bit of a sad or depressed state for like 3 or 4 days, and then I snap out of it, right? And I will find before I realize it, and I got to control myself. And when I thought about it, it's like my entire DVD collection and my entire CD collection back in the day when you didn't have Netflix and stuff like that, my entire DVD collection and my entire CD collection, every single one of those things was purchased when I was depressed, when I was feeling depressed, when I was having an episode, right? Because I'd purchase these things, I'd feel better, stick the movie in, stick the music on, the movie and music give you a bit of a dopamine hit. The television gives you a bit of serotonin, which then calms you down, makes you feel a bit better, and that's that therapy that you're getting, right? So it's that what they call that that reward system, your dopaminergic reward system, your serotonergic, which serotonin calms you down, and that's what's going on with the buying. We're trying to buy our way into feeling better, right? And it also explains why 80% of all the how can I say, what's the way to put it? 80% of all the expenditure decisions are made of women. So 80% of all money, your gross domestic expenditure, the household expenses, 80% of those decisions are made by women and are done by women, right? So, which is why what's one of the big controversies that men and women have, right? Men are like, well, all women do is spend money, and that's one of the reasons why. Where men sort of sit back and they're like, why is it that women need so many pairs of shoes? Why do they need so much clothing? Why do they need so much things? And what a lot of women don't realize is the reason why they're constantly going and buying these things, because it helps them. What they're doing is they're trying to treat their neuroticism through a materialistic avenue. And men do this as well. You'll find. So it's not like it's a sexist thing. Men who are high neuroticism, they do the same thing, right? It's just men experience that less on average. So, which is why, again, stereotypes are always based on the extreme of the expression, and we know that at the extremes that's where women are. So again, one of the controversies between men and women. So men are like, well, women always spend too much, and women are like, well, men don't take anything seriously. That's because we're low in neuroticism. We're not inclined to take anything seriously because we're chilled. It's like, who cares, right? And so there's a problem. So there's that can be inappropriate sometimes to be. You can be too relaxed, right? Or too chilled out, and sometimes you should be worried about stuff. Sometimes you should be more concerned about stuff. So that's where that sort of sits, right? Is that retail therapy? They're trying to make themselves feel better through material means, and that's quite a huge problem. It's also one of the reasons why. If you see this children with the ADD and stuff, with the Ritalin and those medications, why so many housewives started abusing their own children's medication is for that reason, right? The performance issues, and women are, oh, well, I don't perform well, and I've got all these expectations, and then they get overwhelmed and all these kinds of things. And it's also why. So, for example, one of the things that frustrate men a lot is women will go into basically a walk-in closet full of clothing and full of enough clothing to clothe an entire nation of poor people, right? And they'll be like, I've got nothing to wear, right? And men will be like, oh, how can you say that, right? I can make do with like 2 shirts, right? And you've got like 100 pairs of shoes and you've got nothing to wear. And the reason for that is people who are high in neuroticism, they have a bad habit of discounting the positives, right? So, for example, if I can make an example, I had a girlfriend who was very high neuroticism, no self-confidence, no self-worth and things like that. And when I told her I love you, she practically laughed in my face. It's like, well, how could you love me? How could you, it's like, well, it doesn't matter how you feel about it. I'm telling you I love you. And so it's very, very difficult for people. They discount the positives. And you see that with people who suffer from, even men, of course, men or women who suffer from depression. They discount the positives. So you'll be like, well, I love you, for example. And they'll be, oh, you only love me because you have to, right? Rather than be like, wow, this person, they're very, it's a terrible, it really is a terrible and it's a terrible and frightful thing. It really is. And that's why it can be so difficult to bring a person back from like hopelessness. So the thing that causes suicide, most of the people, when they want to commit suicide, when they get to the point where they want to kill themselves, is because they've reached the point where there's hopelessness. There's no more hope. They only see one more thing. And one of the reasons why it can be so difficult to bring them back for that is because depression causes people to discount the positives. So when you tell them, oh, well, think of the people that love you and all of the good things in life, they're actually incapable of doing that. And when you bring out all of these good things, they dismiss them by saying, oh, well, you only love me because you're my family and you've got no choice but to love me, or you only love me because you have to, or whatever the case might be. They assume that they always discount their own intrinsic self-worth, right? So the person must have an ulterior motivation for why that person cares about them and things like that. And it can be a really, really brutal thing. And I, like I said, I've experienced it with a lot of girlfriends, where I had this one girlfriend, man, it was terrible, man. It's like nothing I did could prove the fact that I actually cared for her. It's like, and a lot of you will find yourselves in this situation. Most of you will probably men, but a lot of women will have this as well. So even if you find a guy that's very high in neuroticism, right, every single one of us, probably, if you've dated enough, will have dated that one person who there's nothing you can do that can prove to that person that it's like you spend your entire life trying to prove to this person that you actually love them, and it's a never-ending battle. And it's like, man, you in a way you got to feel sorry for them, because that's their biological proclivity, and they need to see someone to try and get this right in their heads. But if what a word of advice, man, don't get married to someone like that. Don't date someone like that, because you're gonna be proving yourself to that person for the rest of your life, and nothing you ever do will be able to prove you. And they're constantly going to be like looking through your phone to see, oh, you cheating on me, and men do this too, right? So don't think that this is only something women do. I know a lot of women out there who complain about these jealous men that won't let them go anywhere and stuff like that. But this is it happens less with men, because of the disparity, but men do it as well, right? I mean, I know this. My missus knows a guy where his wife doesn't let him go anywhere. He needs to apply for permission in triplicate just to go down to the pub to have a drink with his mates. It's terrible. The jealousy is absolutely awful, right? And they only feel secure by trying to demand that the person stay with them, and right, because there's that anxiety. I might lose the person. If I let them go, I might lose them. They might find someone better, because again, they're very self-critical. They might find someone better. They might run off with someone else because everyone else in the world is better. I don't deserve this person. And it's an absolutely vicious cycle. It's really an absolutely terrible thing, right? And so someone who's low in neuroticism, they don't mind letting the person, because if the person does run off with someone else, they'll be like, oh, well, good riddance then. I'm better off without such a person. Whereas someone high in neuroticism will take it personally. It's like, no, there's something wrong with me rather than something wrong with the other person, because that person was not loyal, whatever the case might be. And the problem is that high neuroticism can be a self-fulfilling prophecy, where you're so hard on your partner that your partner eventually gets fed up, and it's like, well, if I can't convince you that I love you, and you always accusing me of cheating, well, then I've had enough. I'm going off. And so it's self-fulfilling. So the person then breaks up with that person, and they'll be like, oh, well, see, that's confirmation that you're disgusting and you're worthless and you're whatever. And it's an absolutely terrible thing, right? So a few explanations as why women generally are higher in neuroticism. Here's the useful thing about neuroticism is sensitivity to negative emotions. So we often hear people talk about a sixth sense that women have, right? So a woman will be like, she'll feel apprehensive about, let's say, getting into an elevator, for example, right? And then so she takes the stairs, and then the next day she'll read on the newspaper, well, someone got assassinated in the elevator, for example. And she'll be like, well, how did I know? And the reason for that is that sensitivity to negative emotion, it primes you to be very, very sensitive to threat stimulus, right? So and that's why women have that better intuition about if there is a threat. So even if they can't explain it, they're like, oh, hang on, there's something wrong here. They might not. So in the back of the mind, or in the periphery of the vision, they might have picked up on that cue that alerted them to the fact that there was something dangerous. And one of the explanations that there is because the female body is not designed for her alone. It's designed for the mother-child pair bond, which is who's the one that's meant to protect the child and carry the child. So with woman is carrying when she's pregnant, she's carrying the child in a room, or even when the child is still an infant, she's got the child. And so that sensitivity to danger not only to harm herself because she's the mother and needs to look after the child, but someone can attack the child. So she feels that sensitivity to dangers, like to be really, really careful. What is danger? What where are all the threats that could possibly threaten myself and my baby and my family and all of these kinds of things. So it is actually something that's quite necessary, right? So someone who is too low in neuroticism can be very foolhardy. So for example, this is something that you find in men, right? Men are foolhardy. Here's an interesting example. I saw this on the other day. It was on Facebook, this video where you see these men, you know, those Barbie cars, right? Made for Barbies, right? And these tiny little things, and these men, they've got these helmets on, and they're going down this hill in these Barbie cars, right? And and like halfway, they reach like speeds of 25 miles an hour, right? And like halfway down the hill, they just wipe out completely. They go rolling into the and this Barbie car is like wrecked to shreds. It's like only men would do stupid things like that, right? Because they don't have that sense of fear that women generally. Because a lot of times, women look at men and they be like, "You idiot," right? Or "You're gonna kill yourself," right? That's one of the criticisms that women, or they look at me and it's like, what are you what are you doing, right? So all of these videos where you see like there was a show called Jackass, right, where these guys went out and did the most stupid things, and you think like these guys have got a death wish, right? And that's why, if you're low in neuroticism, you can be really, really foolhardy and really stupid and end up killing yourself in the process. And this is one of the reasons why. And this explains why it's who takes the most dangerous jobs in the world. It's men. Men are always the ones that take the most dangerous jobs in the world. And so, for example, 97% of all workplace related deaths are men, right? So that's why we can be a bit foolhardy. We're not particularly interested in health and safety and all of these kinds of things. And one of the reasons why, and health and safety is a good thing. So in the modern society, we have, because we have more of a feminization of society, things like health and safety standards have been brought in. Because women got sick. Women kind of got sick and tired of having husbands maimed at work and dying at work, right? And also because women have come into the workplace, they're a lot more sensitive to danger and threat and injury and all these kinds of things. So that's one of the reasons why that's come in. But at the same time, because of a hypersensitivity, a lot of people in the workplace complain that health and safety is actually it can a lot of times be a hindrance. Because there's so many protocols and things like it can actually get in the way of productivity. So that's where men and women sort of need to find that balance, where you can be so overly concerned for safety and threat that you can actually start becoming counterproductive, but you can also be so foolhardy that you can also be counterproductive because everyone is dying and getting injured. So that's one of the ways where this where that sensitivity to threat is a good thing, but it can also be too much of a bad thing, and also on the other side, because men just kill themselves in the process. And here's one of the interesting things, right? A lot of like the feminist rhetoric these days is like, men were all the inventors of all different kinds of things, and that shows that men are patriarchal and oppressive and all that. And it's actually not true, because you've got to think about what does it mean to invent something. Think about the Wright brothers, right? What does it mean to invent something that flies? It means that at some point you have to strap yourself to something and launch yourself into midair and hope it works, right? And if it doesn't work, what's going to happen? You're going to come crashing and you're going to die, right? The invention of a lot of things requires very, very low neuroticism, because listen guys, inventing stuff is dangerous, right? Think about the one woman that said to hell with it, Madame Curie, right? She discovered radioactivity, and what happened? Well, she died of radiation poisoning, right? Because discovery is important, right? Discovery is something that happens on the edge of uncertainty, right? And this is the thing: people that are high in neuroticism, they don't like uncertainty. They are afraid of uncertainty, and that's why men in general, men are the explorers and men are the inventors, men are the discoverers, because they're low in neuroticism, so they're a little bit foolhardy and they don't mind just going out in there and, the vast majority of men that did that got like eaten by a tiger or mauled by a bear, so sort of thing, if you understand. Or the people that are trying to invent, think of the story of Icarus, fell out of the sky, and things of that sort. So men are the ones that are willing to risk their lives in general more often to go out and take these risks and stuff like that, because all of discovery happens where uncertainty lies, where mystery and uncertainty and danger lies, which is why men are the pioneers. They are the spearheads into the darkness, because in the darkness, that is the place where new and wonderful things can be discovered. But it's also the place where the dragon lives, where the dragon that could eat you alive, that's where that is. And so people who are very, very high in neuroticism, whether male or female, they're not inclined to do that. And in general, you get it in a society. Women look at men and they think, dude, you're insane. You're crazy, right? Think about the inventing of a parachute. At some point, someone had to be willing to jump out of a damn airplane to see if this stupid thing worked. And if it didn't work, well, splat, man. So a lot of this feminist stuff over there, where men are just want to keep women down and oppress and stuff like that. It's like, no. All right. The only reason why today we have the quality of life that we do is because there were millions upon millions of men that were willing to sacrifice their lives, basically, in order to go into the unknown, to discover things and bring those discoveries back into the society so that they could be used in order to improve society, right? So the social rhetoric out there is very, very unbalanced and very, very ignorant, very shallow thinking sort of thing. They don't take seriously the differences between men and women. And once you start looking at the differences between men and women, you start to realize, hey, there's something there, and that explains a lot of the stuff that we see in the world. That it's not just social constructs, right? It's biological. We're hardwired to be certain ways, right? And that's why these things are the case. So let's have a look at some research. I've got here I've got a couple of peer-reviewed journals here in front of me. So I've got neuropharmacology. This is from nature.com, where they talk about neuroticism as a risk factor for depression. So if you're high in neuroticism, you're at a very, very, very high risk for developing depression. Even if you're not born with it, developing it later on, you're very, very, very high risk. So you've got to be careful, right? So if you do a personality test and you find that you're high in neuroticism, man, let me tell you. First of all, if you're very, very high neuroticism, depending how high you are, there's almost no difference between you and someone who's actually got depression. It's very, very difficult. Pardon me. But if you find that you are in that risk for depression, you will find that you've got to be very careful. So eat properly, exercise, make sure, man, that you maintain your body. Stay away from alcohol, stay away from drugs, stay away from drunk food, because you're at risk, man, and be very, very, very careful of that. It's a really it's devastating. It really, really is devastating. You're going to get it, right? You're very, very, very high risk. And they're finding that there's again, one of the reasons why we're finding that this has actually got a biological basis is because we're finding these in our genes, right? So here, if I have a look in Sage journals, the devil you know, neuroticism, it predicts neural response to uncertainty. So in here, if I read the abstract for you, individuals differ in the extent to which they respond negatively to uncertainty. Although some individuals feel little discomfort when facing the unknown, those high in neuroticism find it aversive. So this is a study that they did where they found that there's a strong correlation between the fear of uncertainty and neuroticism. And so exploration, people who are high in neuroticism, they stay away from that kind of thing. Those are the monsters can stay over there, and I'm going to stay over here where I'm familiar with things, right? Which is often one of the things that you find if you watch films, for example, that are dedicated, that target women specifically, you get what they call rom-coms and chick flicks and things of that sort, right? You will find that there's a theme that always go through. Women seem very obsessed for discovering themselves, and they feel repressed and oppressed, and because this is because of neuroticism, right? Because they're self-critical, and they how can I say, they restrict themselves because there's a fear response. They fear uncertainty, and this will lead to you feeling unduly repressed and oppressed and restricted. And that's a self-imposed thing, right? It's very, very much a self-imposed thing. And so you get this, and that's why women generally like these chick flicks where, there's a group of women who go on a road trip to find themselves, right? And you often hear women say that, well, I want to go find myself and find who I am and discover who I am and things like that, because their whole lives they've been too afraid of this and too afraid of that and too afraid of that. And they get to the point where they're so fed up, where they're like, well, then they become volatile, and they're like, to hell with it, I'm going to go, sort of thing. And this is one of the problems in the world, where because of the neuroticism, they're blaming society, and they're blaming men, and they're blaming the world on the fact that it's a threatening place. Well, if you weren't so threatening, and if you weren't so scary, then maybe we would be able to express ourselves a little bit more. And it's like, sorry, love, the world is a threatening place, whether men are there or not. The world, that's just what the world is. That's just what the world is. And you can't blame men for it, right? Because, the world is threatening for men too. The thing is, men just don't care, and they go anyway, even if it kills them, right? So so if you have high neuroticism and you see something that's threatening, one of the things for you when you're developing your characters, make sure that if you feel threatened or offended or whatever the case might be, you need to realize, you need to mitigate whether even though you feel threatened, is there really a threat there? Because it might not be, right? Because if you're overly sensitive to threat stimulus, then even things that aren't threatening are going to be a threat to you, right? And you can't expect the whole world to turn the entire world into a place of puppy dogs and cushions, because the world is not that way, and a world like that would be unthinkable then for other people. It would be boring, and it would lack adventure for then other people. So we've got to mitigate these things. There's a limit to how safe. There's a limit to how safe and certain you can make the world, right? Because generally the world is a very unsafe and a very unsafe and uncertain place. And we build society in order to make the world more predictable and to make the world more safe, right? But there's a limit to that, right? You can never get it perfectly that way. And the fact of the matter is that if you go too far in making the world a safe place and an unthreatening place, and you go too far, then basically all you're doing is making the world repressive. You're actually making the world repressive. And you do find that a lot with like the social justice warriors, where they're actually going too far, that they're wanting to eliminate, for example, freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is under attack because, well, you're not allowed to say this because it offends me. You're not allowed to say this because it makes me feel bad. You're not allowed to say this because, etc., etc., etc. And they always want to blame someone else, and they never look at themselves and think, well, this offends me, but should I actually be offended by this or not, right? That's the temperamental bias. Well, because I feel it's offensive, because I feel threatened, therefore it is offensive and threatening. It's like, no. What is offensive and what is threatening is very, very subjective, very, very subjective. So this is one of the conversations where men and women need to reach an understanding in that way. And again, it's also why, here's one of those things, right? When we look about mating strategies between men and women, right? Women always mate. So let's say you have a hierarchy, right? So 1 to 10, right? At number 1, you've got the most dominant man, and at 10 is the least dominant man. And then you've got another pyramid where you've got 1 to 10. 1 is the most dominant woman, and 10 is the least dominant woman, right? So what do you find with mating strategies? women always mate either across or up, right? Either across or up a dominance hierarchy, always, right? And it's just one of those things, right? Because a woman doesn't want to have to look after a man. So women always go for men who are at least as competent as they are, or more so. Okay? So one thing that you find that women get very irritated about out there is you get these really, really horrid shrews that are like, oh, men are afraid of strong women. It's like, no, they're not, right? Men are not afraid of strong women, right? What's going on here is you've got a mating strategy that women only mate either across or up the dominance hierarchy, and those women who complain that they can never find a man because men are afraid of strong women is actually nonsense, because what chances are they're just a shrew and they're absolute miserable to be around, and men have absolutely no problem telling such a person to get lost, right? Because think about it, right? Who wants to be around someone who's miserable all the time, right? And constantly, all the time. No one wants that. Men don't put up with that, right? And the reason, and here's the thing, women, unlike men, women are selective breeders, okay? And forgive, this doesn't sound very wonderful, but I want to speak in very biological terms here, right? Women are selective breeders, right? Men are the ones who have to approach the woman and get permission, right? Like a bird, like a weaver bird. They weave their little nest. The female bird comes in. Do I like it? No. I don't like the way you did the kitchen. Get lost. Build it again. I'm going to go to that guy down the road. He makes a bigger kitchen. Men are competing for the woman's attention, and then women select from the best. That's the mating strategy in human beings, right? So women are selective breeders, and the reason why men don't go for women who are higher than them in the dominance hierarchy is because those women are not interested in them. What woman is going to give a weaselly little useless man a second thought? It's not going to happen, right? Because one of the traits is because women are higher in neuroticism, they want a man that can take care of business, right? They want a man who's not afraid to go and get and go and do, and if there's a threat in life or there's a threat in the world, whatever, they want to know, this guy, he's going to take care of business. He's going to be the man and whatever. Not oppressive, obviously, because being a man is not oppression, right? Being a man is you take care of business, you take charge, you've got authority, you look after people, you protect people, and you don't take any nonsense. That's the kind of men that women want, and those men are found higher up the dominance hierarchy. So that's why things are transpiring, and that explains why men. So, for example, if you think of it in a biological way, we inherit the traits from our parents, right? And one of the things that can explain why there are differences biologically, major differences between men and women, is because of the way we select each other and breed with each other. So that if all the women in the world only go for the most dominant man that they can find, right, then it makes sense that the more generations and the more iterations of this you have, it means that on average, men are going to be more dominant than women, because that's what women selectively choose men for in order to breed with. So men get more dominant, and things of that sort. And this is why, at least biblically, right? If you look at the Bible is very, very, it's like, be careful what you do, because the sins of the fathers will go down to the third and fourth generation, right? And so what happens is nowadays you have this absolute catastrophe where women generally are not discerning in the kind of men that they mate with, right? They will mate with any no good loser there is out there. So what's happening, right, is that with the sexual revolution, right, where women can just have free sex no matter what, women stopped being the selective, the natural selection within the human species, right? Because women played the role of natural selection in the human species, because women are the selective pressure, right? They choose the best and the brightest, right? So what happens is once women stop choosing the best and brightest, what's going to happen? Right? Well, you're going to and I know this sounds terrible, but you're going to start having idiot children because they're only breeding with idiots, right? And and that's what you're beginning to get. Nowadays we have this problem where people are getting worse, right? There's a drop in testosterone with men. that we've seen steadily over time is a drop in testosterone, a drop in manliness. Men are becoming more neurotic over time. They're becoming, and I'm being someone that's involved with youth at the church, and I've been youth leader and things like that before. And one of the main things that I get a lot of the young girls saying is like, I can't find any men that I can be confident in, that they're going to take care of business, that they're going to be a husband, that they're going to be a man. Right? And here's something that we must understand, right? This feminist rhetoric that women don't want strong and dominant men is garbage, right? I think only about 10 or 20% of women in any population identify as feminists, right? That means the vast majority of women want a stereotypical man. And by stereotypical man, I mean a man who's bright, who's high in competence, and who takes care of business and is going to look after them. That's actually what the majority of women want. So this feminist rhetoric is actually a lot of garbage, right? It's neuroticism pathologized, and it's the shrews that all congregate. Obviously not all, I'm making a generalization here, but those are usually the loudest and the noisiest ones, the ones that make it onto television and YouTube, right? Those are the ones that make it there, right? So, but your average woman is a lot more chilled out and stuff like that, and they're like, yeah, I want a guy who takes care of business. I'm not the one I don't want to go burn my bra, and that's ridiculous, right? Your average woman is a lot more moderate than what you see in terms of females that are like these social justice warriors running around screaming topless in the street and stuff like that. That's not what most women are like. So yeah, that's just some very interesting considerations to have there. There's a lot more subtlety to the conversation that is required, right? Here's another study, also psychosomatic medicine, the official journal of the American Psychosomatic Society, Journal of Biobehavioral Medicine, right? So they did a study, neuroticism, extraversion, and mortality in a defined population of older persons. So if we go straight to the conclusion, results suggest that higher extraversion and lower neuroticism are associated with reduced risk of mortality in old age. So if you are high in neuroticism, low in extraversion, you're more likely to die young. Is one of those things. You're not going to do so well. You're not going to do so well in your old age. And it's just one of those things, man. Because that has a lot to do with your habits and things like that. And how you live your life in general. So if you're high in neuroticism, you're going to have a hard time, because here's one of the things. High neuroticism is associated with high anxiety and high stress. Stress kills. End of story. Stress kills, man. It's as simple as that. It causes your body to release toxins. You knot your body up. So all of those knots and things you have, knots your body up, and it wrecks you. It completely wrecks you. So you're gonna die. It's much sooner. It's just one of those things. There's not a lot we can do about it. That's just one of the unfortunate things. Here's an interesting one you find it in Sage journals. They call it the papers Motivational Salience, right? Amygdala tuning from traits, needs, values, and goals. So here what they're doing is they're talking about they're actually just assessing the function of the amygdala because what was the old thought is that the amygdala, which is a part in your brain that regulates emotions, they thought that it dealt exclusively with neurotic traits like fear and things like that. And what they're discussing here is that the amygdala actually how can I say, the amygdala regulates all the emotions and not just the negative ones as well. They're finding that it's got a much broader function. Right. Another interesting thing is that people who are higher in neuroticism have, so if you look at my extraversion video, you will find that people who are high in extraversion, they have a much more dense brain area in the amygdala, and the prefrontal cortex is more dense. So there's more neurologically compact, right? So basically what that means is there's more brain resource in order for processing. And what they found that on the left hemisphere of the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, what they found is people who are high in neuroticism are also have a lower density in the left, and also they don't have as dense in the right hemisphere. So this almost seems how can I say? So it almost seems like people who are high in neuroticism and things like that, they actually have less resources, right? Because one of the things with facing uncertainty is there's a lot of mental processing that has to go on when you are dealing with uncertainty, with things that are new, and there's a lot of learning, and you've got to be very, very adaptive. So it seems like people, whatever it is that is found in the genetics, right, in the person's genetics, because they have found genetic correlations, right, is that there seems to be less neurological resources with which to deal with uncertainty. There's almost seems to be less processing power, and so then the proclivity is just to stay away from things that are new and uncertain and things of that sort. There's more of a recoil, right? And so that's what that one is about. There's a lot of really, really interesting stuff. Here's another one. Let me just have a look. Oh yeah, this one's on the genetic background. So what they're saying is they seem to have found associations of the S allele in the 5-HTT-LPR with neuroticism-related traits and temperaments in psychiatrically healthy populations. So this is discussing, I'm going to put all the links up. So they're discussing, they've actually seemed to find that there's a correlation with what they call the S allele. So this is in your genes. They're finding that there's a correlation there. So these things are all very, very biological, which is why I said before, right? Even though we can get very irritated with someone who is easily offended, with someone who's causelessly peevish about what you say, and all of these, it can be, for someone who's high in dominance, we look at a person, we think, oh well, you're a bit of a wuss, we need to be a little bit more understanding, because to a large degree, not 100%, but to a large degree, we almost can't help it. Because this is our knee-jerk reaction to things, right? And so when I say it's not 100% outside of our things, is because this is then where the development of character comes in. So what happens is, a lot of parents, if they see a child who's high neuroticism, so the child is very withdrawn and very much themselves, what a lot of parents do is they will tend to be overprotective of that child, because they see the child is a little bit more skittish and things like that. That's actually the worst thing that you can do for that child, because you're preventing that child from developing the character that's required to balance out that personality trait, right? So if the child is very withdrawn or very volatile, the parents usually then pander to that, and rather than being disciplined and say, hang on, listen, you've got to deal with these things. You've got to go out there and teach the children like that. Teach them how to be brave. Teach them how to come out of their shell a little bit more, right? You've got to pay that extra attention to the kids, and don't overprotect them, because it's the worst thing you can do. Because when that child eventually grows up and goes out into the world, they're going to be screwed. They're going to be afraid of everything. It's really, really, really quite terrible, man. So social anxiety and things of that sort, it's this trait that's too high, and it's been pathologized. So this new style of parenting, where you, like what they call like helicopter moms, where they do absolutely every single thing in their power to never let their child experience a negative emotion ever in their entire lives, that is the worst thing you can do. You're basically setting your child up for failure, and to be completely useless when they grow up, because they're going to be afraid of everything. And not only that, here's one of the interesting things. People who are narcissistic, right, are high in neuroticism, but also high in extraversion. So if you have a child that's high in extraversion and high in neuroticism, and you don't get them to, the extroversion is good, but if you don't get them to sort out that neuroticism, they're going to grow up and they're going to become narcissistic. And that's what you're finding in the youth today. You're finding that a lot of these feminists that go out there that want to scream people down and shout people down. These people are so narcissistic. It's absolutely unbelievable, because basically what they're doing is, whatever value there was in feminism in the beginning, right, that can be argued. So there was value there. Women needed equality. That's good. But what it has become is these narcissistic people have taken over, because they've gotten into these positions where they have a platform to speak, and they've become narcissistic. And basically what they're doing is they're wanting the entire world to just bow down and do what they want. Otherwise they completely freak out and become completely indignant, and, oh, how dare you, and we have to do it the way I say. And it's very interesting. For example, the other day I was watching a transgender person on doing an interview, and this transgender person was basically saying that I did something that the social justice warrior people who are supposed to be advocating for me as a transgender person, because I did something they didn't approve of, they basically ostracized me and completely cast me out of their little niche group. Right? They were actually intolerant, even though they're always screaming, "Oh, tolerance!" And that's why that narcissism that eventually develops. They preach tolerance, but they're actually very intolerant in their tolerance, right? And you'll find that people that are very, very high neuroticism, they're actually not as tolerant. They want tolerance. They will, I want tolerance, but they want you to tolerate them, but they won't necessarily give it the same way. So for example, we all know these kinds of people at work, right? You've always got that one person who's very, very good at giving stick to everyone else, right? Teasing other people, joking with other people. But as soon as you turn around and tease them, all of a sudden, they don't take it very well, right? So you get those people, they can't take as good as they give. It's people that are very, very high neuroticism, and chances are they're quite narcissistic, and that's that temperament going on there. That's absolutely dreadful. And that would be a person that's high in extroversion, whereas someone who's very, very low in extroversion, who's an introvert, and high in neuroticism, they'll be very different. They'll be very those are the kind of people that you can exploit. Very, very easy to exploit. People that are low in extroversion and high neuroticism, those are people that you can exploit, and they won't fight back. You can do whatever you want to them. It's very, very terrible. And those people, interestingly enough, in all of this social justice rhetoric, those people are usually the ones that are forgotten, because those are the ones that won't speak up for themselves. Whereas the ones that are making all of the noise, generally they're the ones high in neuroticism, high in openness. So those are usually the narcissists that are running around and, we demand this and we demand that, and they pretend to be advocating for the one that doesn't have the voice, but they're not really. Most of the time they're not really at all. Which ends up being the case when you see when they then enact policies in government, and those policies don't really help the people that don't have the voice. That's how you know the policies aren't really helping the people that they're supposed to help. And that's how you can sort of, like the Bible says, right? You judge them by their fruit. What do they actually produce? Are they actually producing a benefit or not? Are they actually helping the people that they claim to help or not? And when they don't, then you can see, well, this is not really bearing good fruit. And so there's something else going on there, right? So some interesting things there to think about. Here's another one, Science Direct, another very, very good Journal of Research and Personality, volume 44. Very interesting. Performance differences explained by the neuroticism facets, withdrawal, and volatility. Variations in task demand and effort allocation. So let me read the abstract for you. It's very, very interesting. The present study investigated the relationship between two aspects of trait neuroticism, which is withdrawal and volatility, in a performance, right? So what they did is they got 68 participants to perform a search task in 3 difficulty situations. So get these 68 people and perform a task, a search task, right? A search task, and then increasing in difficulty, right? Three levels of difficulty, right? So, and they rated their performances, right? And rated their invested invested effort per condition, right? So at the easiest level, easy, medium, difficult, right? So how much on the people of each trait, how well did they perform at each level, right? Results show that the two aspects of neuroticism are differently related to search performance, right? So whether you are high in withdrawal or high in volatility will determine, so even though you're both high in neuroticism, there's still a difference in how it will be expressed in the two traits. So Especially in high demanding situation of task difficulty, the relationship between performance and invested effort is negative for high volatility individuals, while for high withdrawal individuals, additional effort investment leads to relatively better performance. So here's what's going on, right? As the difficulty level increases, so does the higher level of stress, right? So the more difficult it is, the more highly stressed you become. So the more highly stressed you become, if you're higher in volatility, putting more effort doesn't produce a better outcome, because if you're high in volatility, you're more likely to say to hell with it. Screw this. I don't need to do this. And they're more likely to storm out, right? Whereas someone who's high in withdrawal, if they put greater effort, they're more likely, because they don't have the volatility, right? So they will be a lot more patient and be like, okay, well, if I put in more effort, and they found that people who are even though they're high in withdrawal, they find that if those people put in more effort to the difficult tasks, that they will be more successful than people higher in volatility. So just to finish it off, the discussion focuses on how considering the two neuroticism facets, task demand and effort investment, add to the understanding of trait neuroticism, its relationship to performance and involvement of the dysfunctional regulation of mental resources. So basically, if you're out in the workplace, right, and you've got a very high demand, high difficulty job, you don't want to give it to people who are high in volatility. People who are high in withdrawal, they will be able to do it. So here's one of the interesting things, right? What have we found? You see, again, feminism is saying that, oh, all these high-powered jobs are all dominated by men, and they say, well, that's sexism, that's the glass ceiling, and women don't seem to go in there. Now, here's the interesting thing, right? We know that women are not only higher in withdrawal, but they're also higher in volatility, right? And the high-paying jobs, so the CEOs, those are not what they call privileged positions. No, that's rubbish. Those are the highest stress positions in the world. That's why they get paid the big bucks, right? If you want the big bucks, you have to be willing to take on the big responsibility, and big responsibility means big stress. Very, very big stress. You've got to be very, very resilient to stress. So if you go and you look at the most high-powered people in the world, right, they will, all of them, be very, very low in neuroticism. You have to be, otherwise you'll burn out, and you'll end up in an institute somewhere completely loony, because it's so high stress and high demand that it's unbelievable. And this is one of the reasons how we explain, because women have make different choices in balancing work versus personal life. So women prioritize personal life more than they prioritize work. But also, the more difficult the job gets, the less inclined women are to actually go into those positions, because of the high neuroticism, the high withdrawal and the high volatility means one of two things. High volatility means they're more inclined to just say to hell with it. This is not worth it. I'm going to go and do something else that brings me more pleasure. And also, even though the high withdrawal means you can perform better if you put in more effort, the problem is that it gets to a certain point where you're putting in so much effort that you burn out and you drop out, and you can't handle it more. You literally end up getting sick and burning out. It's what they call burnout syndrome or something like that. They completely burn out. They can't do it, right? And again, so what happens is, when we look at the world, we find that in the highest paying jobs and the very, very high status, high pay, high stress jobs, you find is all men. Like 98% of them is men, and very few women. And again, remember what I said earlier on, when you've got the bell curve, in the middle are most of the men and women, right, in terms of neuroticism, right? But as you go to the extremities, you'll find, so the higher you go in neuroticism and withdrawal and volatility, you get more and more women, but also fewer and fewer men. And as you go down to low neuroticism, low volatility, low withdrawal, you get less and less women, but also more and more men. So at those extremes, that's where we see the majority of people. So at this extreme, in the low neuroticism, low volatility, low withdrawal, that's where most of the men are, because that's biological. And those are precisely the group of people that are the most resilient to being in these high-powered jobs where there's nothing but stress. There's just stress all the time. There's 1,000 people making demands on you all the time, and you are responsible for a whole bunch of stuff where one decision can cost the company $100 million, like overnight, the whole company, and people lose their jobs, and the whole thing is a catastrophe. And it's only that small, if you've got the bell curve, so everyone there, it's only as you get to this extreme where there's that where it's mostly men, it's only that small sliver of people that are low enough in neuroticism that they can even cope with those jobs at all. So what a lot of people don't, when they look at this, they give a very generalized, very, very shallow view where it's like, oh, it's just misogyny, it's a glass ceiling. And it's like, no, because the fact of the matter is, yeah, you don't see a lot of women in those positions, but guess what? The vast majority of men don't get those positions, so if you've got to look on whole, right, how many people in the total population would get that job? It's like 99.9% of people would not manage in those jobs, right? Forget about male or female, just the vast majority of people would go insane within 1 week trying to do those jobs, right? So it's only this small sliver of completely like almost very, very low neuroticism men that can even cope with those jobs. And then what you will find, right, is that the women who manage to get in those positions, those are the rare few women, because again, with that bell curve, it tapers off. It's those very, very one in a 1 million women that are low enough in neuroticism, volatility, and withdrawal that they can actually be there and manage and compete and really go for it. And you will generally find that those women in those high-powered positions, if you go to them and say to them, listen, what do you think of all of this social justice stuff, of all of this stuff that feminists are busy saying? They will say, well, that's absolute rubbish. That's absolute rubbish. Women are not kept out. If you want to do it, then you can do it, because they're there. They're proof that women can do it. The fact of the matter, and they will tell you straight away, is like, but the fact of the matter is most people can't manage. It's because it's ridiculously competitive. It's ridiculous. It is so competitive. So those are one of those things, so you've got to match if you want to go and get a job. Because here's the thing, right? You have a lot of these women in the feminism, they want to complain that men have got all these power jobs, and we want to see more women. They never say, I want to go there. Right? You talk to these women, oh, would you want that? No, I wouldn't want. Most of them wouldn't want it, so they're all jumping it down, going crazy. Oh, we want to see more women. Oh, which woman exactly? Which woman? Do you want that job? No. I actually want to be at home looking after children. I want to raise a family. So it's like, okay, so which woman are you talking about? Where are these women that actually want those jobs? And the fact of the matter is, those women exist, but they're like 1 in every 1,000 women, if that. Right? So, and so we want to see women. We have to see women. Well, but you would if there were more women that had that temperament. So, and this is one of those things that's very important. If you're going to go and into work, you've got to make sure that. So, if you are high in neuroticism, high in volatility, high in withdrawal, avoid high stress jobs. Like flat out, avoid high stress jobs, because you're not going to manage. And high stress jobs are all exactly those, the the managerial positions where you've got responsibility for people, and you're going to have you have everyone underneath you that you're responsible for constantly complaining to you about everything and their dog, right? Complaining about absolute. So you've got all these people under you who you're responsible for, and then you have everyone on top of you demanding things of you that you need to then implement on the people underneath you who resent you because you're in a position of power, and so they're recalcitrant and obnoxious, and you've got to constantly fight with them. And the thing is, people who are high in neuroticism want people to like them, right? People who are also higher in agreeableness, and women are high in agreeableness, but people who are high in neuroticism, they don't handle being hated very well, right? And if you're a manager, guess what? It comes with the territory. If you're in a manager, people not going to like you, because you're the one that has to do disciplinary and reprimand people and stuff like that, right? And that's why you get paid more as a manager, because there's all these responsibilities and people don't like you very much. And in general, women just don't like that. Women hate it. They want to be liked. And the thing is, if you are a manager and you try to be liked, and everything you do is to try and be liked by your staff end up taking advantage of you, which then means you're an ineffective manager because they'll take advantage of you. And I've seen this. I mean, I've got people that talk to me all the time, where they, if the manager is of a particular type of personality, whether male or female, and people walk all over them and they're ineffective managers. It simply doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. So here are some considerations. If you're going to go and do any job, you want to avoid jobs that are high risk, right? Because if you're high neuroticism, you're going to be afraid of going to work basically all the time. High risk jobs, avoid. High stress, high pressure jobs where there's people constantly demand, not requesting nice, demanding. Because here's one of those things, right? You get these feminists and they're completely delusional. They're like, oh, we should build companies that are more feminine personality centric. And it's like, is that going to really work? Right? Because they're like, because it's the market that sets the tone for what is demanded in the society, in the marketplace. So, for example, let's say you open up a company, let's say a law firm, right? And we're going to do things in a more feminine way, and we're going to resist the patriarchal demands. And here's the thing: you're going to have a client, right, who's paying you like $1,000 a second, all right? Let's say you've got a client in Japan or in China or wherever it might be, and they're going to phone you up at 3:00 in the morning on a Sunday, right, and say, we have a problem that's costing us 50 trillion pounds a second, and you better sort it out right this instant, or we're going to find someone else, right? Are you going to say no? Of course you're not going to say no. Oh, of course, I've got to fly. Just always, right? They're going to tell you to get lost, right? They're going to go and find some other hungry person that's like, I want the work, give it to me. And they're going to give the work to them. It's just that simple. So it's this idea that the marketplace is set by patriarchy and by male, whatever the case might be, it's nonsense. The marketplace sets itself. It's like, is the demand there? All right, there's the demand, and the work goes to whoever meets the demand. End of story. So you simply can't have a society where, like, the feminists are saying, well, we need to take away these patriarchal. It's like, no, that's not patriarchy. It's like the customer is paying you because they need something from you, right? It's customer oriented. The free market is customer oriented. And if the customer wants X and Y and Z, and they want it now, otherwise, because they've got responsibilities, right? They've got responsibilities to their customers and to their employees and stuff like that. And it's like, they're paying you money, man. You better get onto the problem like this instant. You can't go and tell them, oh, well, I'll do it later. They'll be like, well, to hell with you then. We're going to go find someone else that's going to do it. And the one who's willing, and generally, again, the ones who do overtime and willing to put up with that stress are the men. It's just one of those things, right? Oh, this fly, it's just going to ruin my video. Forgive me, right? It's just, it came up out of, I think they like osmosis through the wall because I've got windows and everything closed. It's ridiculous. Anyway, if you're high neuroticism, man, if you're in a relationship and you're high neuroticism, just be aware that your partner is going to have a hell of a time trying to convince you that they really, really love you. It's, it's going to be self-worth problems and stuff like that. Again, here's one of the other considerations. You have these social justice warriors, right? They don't just want, like with the LGBT and the feminism and all these kinds of things, you will find that for the long time they will say, we want equality, right? But they didn't stop at equality, right? They want acceptance. They're demanding that you accept them, right? So they've actually gone from, oh, we just want, because that was it. They soft pedal it in the beginning. They're like, oh, we just want equality. We just want what everyone else has. Okay, so what everyone else has. So they're now equal, and they can get married and have children and do whatever it is they want, all recognized as equal under the law. You can't discriminate and all that kind of. But they're not happy with that. It's like you have to agree. You have to agree. And not only must you agree, it's like, did you ever, when you were growing up, did you ever have your mother say to you, not only are you going to do it, but you're going to like it? Did your mother ever do that to you? Those of you who are Latino like me, or Caribbean or African or whatever, you are going to know very much, because our parents tend to be quite forceful, right? So So that's the again, the neuroticism trait. Not only do they have some serious self-criticizing issues and stuff like that, but they really need people to like them in order to counterbalance their personal self-loathing, so to speak, right? So so for people to be critical of them, it's just too much to take, right? So then they almost get to the point, especially if they're volatile, where not only do they want you to accept them, but they're going to force you to like them, right? They're going to force you to, you have to like me. And you see that playing out a lot in the social justice stuff, where you're not allowed to criticize feminist ideology, LGBT you're not allowed to criticize it at all. Otherwise, hate speech, and you're a bigot, and you're in this and this. And it's like, you're not even allowed to disagree with it. And it's like, well, if they wanted to be equal, right? Equality means that you can be criticized just like everyone else, but they don't want that. It's like, you're not allowed to, it's like, you have to either like them and like practically want to be one of them, or you're a Nazi, basically. So that's what it tends to be like. And it's, oh man, it's absolutely awful. It's really a debilitating, it's really, really debilitating personality trait to have. The higher you are in it, the more debilitating it is. You can get to the point where it's like self-hatred even, and it's awful, man. It's really, really awful. Self-worth problems, it all comes from high neuroticism. It's devastating. It's devastating. And if you see this in your children, man, you gotta help them out. And if you see it in yourself, realize that regardless of how you feel, you do have intrinsic self-worth. You have a right to be confident. You have a right to, and you don't have to force other people to do it. Try and find that in yourself, right? That's one of the things. Work on it. Try to get that self-esteem and things like that, right? And there's a difference between self-esteem and narcissism, right? Please be careful, right? So, just be careful with that, man, and meditate on it. It's tough, and it rips families apart, man. It's like, for example, someone who's high neuroticism is more likely to be dissatisfied with things. So it's like the pessimism trait, right? So again, you see the difference in between men and women. 70% of all divorces are initiated by women, right? Because they're more likely to experience low satisfaction. So you hear about that all the time. Read a woman's magazine, right? Are you satisfied with your sex? Are you satisfied with this? There's just dissatisfaction all the time. All the time. It's like, and this is one of the things that's come out in the frustration between the sexes, where men complain that their women are never satisfied, right? And this is one of the reasons. High neuroticism is very, very difficult to please someone who's high neuroticism. Very, very difficult to please them, right? And they're easily aggrieved and easily dissatisfied by it. It's really, really tough. And this trait demolishes marriages, because here's the thing, right? Most of the people will be like, oh, that's because our men are abusive. Rubbish. It's like 1% of divorce cases of divorces happen because of domestic abuse and stuff like that, right? But the vast majority of divorces, it's women. So 70% of all divorces are initiated by women, and the vast majority of reasons given is dissatisfaction. Literally, that's all it is. They're dissatisfied. That's the reason given. It's not abuse. It's not whatever. It's like a small minority of them, a tiny percent. It's like 1% of them, if that, is domestic abuse and violence and all these kinds of things. But in the vast majority of cases, it's dissatisfaction. They're just dissatisfied. And it's like, well, how are you just dissatisfied? Is that how you, or enough to make you walk away from a marriage? Maybe you're just being neurotic. You know what I'm saying? What are your expectations based on? And other people are not responsible for your, I mean, they can try and help you because we all have duties for each other, but ultimately you can't expect the other person to be constantly validating you all the time. It gets tiresome, especially because your partner, whether you're a male or a female, your partner can only try and convince you so many times that they really love you. They can only hear you don't love me so many times before they get sick of hearing it and be like, well, screw you. I'm going to find someone who I don't constantly have to prove myself to all the time. It's not good on a marriage. It's not good on a marriage. And here's another interesting phenomenon. I find it, and it's the most insane thing, right? And this is something that I hear from men all the time, and I hear women admit it. And the thing is, they're not embarrassed about it, right? They're not. This is the thing. So it's not even something that's secret or hidden away. Women admit it, right? Then they're not shy. Where they will have a dream that their husband cheated on them, and they will wake up. So that's neuroticism. That's the reason why they're having the dream is because they're insecure, right? It's not based on anything, right? So they'll have the dream, and then they'll wake up and they'll go and come down like a ton of bricks. So their husband wakes up. He's catching absolute blazes from his wife because she had a dream. It's like, well, how can I control what you dream about? I mean, what are you even going on? And it's completely insane. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard women admit this, that this is something they do. It's like, you need to stop doing that, because that's your own insecurity, and you're going to drive your man away. You're going to drive your man away, because after a while, he's going to get sick and tired of constantly trying to prove himself to you. And here's the thing, ladies, right? A man must prove himself to you before you get married. Before you get married, because then he gets married to you, and boom, that's his stamp of, I choose you. I choose you. Have I proved myself? When you say yes to a man, I'll marry you, you are basically telling him that you've proved yourself. I'll go with you, because that's what men are supposed to do. Men are supposed to prove themselves. That's why in the old days they had you had things like lobola, the bride price, right? It's the man giving a price. It's not because he's buying you like your cattle. It's he's proving himself. I can afford to look after you. This is so in South Africa you have lobola. I'm going to give 10 cows, right? I'm going to give 10 cows. It's proving to the parents that I have the resources and the personality, because it means I work hard. It means I look after my business. I take care of business, right? I look after myself. Here's the proof that I can look after your wife. And so if the woman says yes, what you're saying to the man is like, yes, you've proved yourself. You've done enough to prove yourself. So if you get married with a guy, the guy goes into the marriage thinking, well, I've proved myself. So we're then gonna carry on with the relationship and evolve. And if you've got a woman that's constantly treating you like this is your first date, right, where you constantly have to prove yourself, the guy's eventually going to get fed up. And vice versa, right? So if you've got a high neuroticism man that's constantly demanding, even you woman, you don't want a guy that's constantly insecure and checking through your phone and, you're smiling at that guy. I'm going to go beat him up. You don't want a guy like that either. So men wouldn't want a woman like that either. You got to think about these things, right? You can't put your other half through that kind of thing. It's gonna destroy your marriage. You're gonna be absolutely miserable. You're gonna alienate each other, because at some point you've got to accept, right? And one of the things is you can do is learn that your feeling, that emotion, doesn't necessarily always represent reality. And that's part of maturation and stuff like that. And we develop character and means of getting around these things. Anyway, right. So I need to finish it off there, because otherwise there's always so much stuff that we can talk about. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that helps you out. Please share and please subscribe and spread it around. Hopefully this helps people. If you've got questions, put it in the comments. Find me on Facebook. Go and chat to me there. Some Christian guy on Facebook as well. On One Way, same thing. Go ahead. If you think I'm an idiot and you disagree, go ahead. We can have a chat about it. Maybe I can even get you on a conference call. Who knows, right? Phone in and we have a chat about it and put it up. Who knows, right? Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your time, and cheerio. God bless.